May 7, 1915. A luxury ocean liner glides through calm waters off the coast of Ireland. Families are dining. Children are laughing. In just 18 minutes, nearly 1,200 of them will be dead. But what if I told you this wasn't an accident? That the ship was carrying secret weapons, and the people in charge knew it could be sunk? This isn't the story of a shipwreck. It's the story of a betrayal so cold-blooded, it changed the course of World War I. And history tried to bury it. Subscribe to Infinity now, because in this video, we're diving deep into a cover-up that starts with a torpedo, and ends with a question no government wants you to ask. In the early 20th century, ocean liners were the crown jewels of engineering, symbols of speed, power, and class. After the Titanic sank in 1912, the world watched every ship that followed with a nervous eye. And among them, none were more closely watched than the RMS Lusitania. Built by the Cunard Line and launched in 1906, the Lusitania was a marvel. She wasn't just luxurious, she was fast. Armed with turbine engines, she could cross the Atlantic in under 5 days. To many, she was the answer to German naval power and Titanic paranoia rolled into one. But unlike the Titanic, the Lusitania was designed during a time of rising tension, especially between Britain and Germany. Behind the polished wood, chandeliers, and fine dining, there were quiet whispers about her dual identity, a passenger ship and a warship in disguise. Officially, she was a peaceful vessel, but the British Admiralty had secretly classified her as an armed merchant cruiser. She had fittings for deck guns. She had speed that could outrun most U-boats. And more importantly, she had room to carry more than luggage. As war erupted in Europe in 1914, the Lusitania continued its voyages. But each crossing became more dangerous. German U-boats lurked in the Atlantic, hunting British ships. And the Lusitania was sailing right into contested waters. Still, passengers boarded her with confidence. It was believed the Germans wouldn't target a civilian ship, especially not one carrying Americans. It was unthinkable. But war doesn't care much for what's unthinkable. On May 1, 1915, the Lusitania departed from New York City with 1,959 souls on board. Among them, businessmen, families, crew, and even infants. But what most of them didn't know was what the Lusitania was carrying below the deck. Hidden within her cargo, over 4 million rounds of rifle ammunition, hundreds of cases of artillery shells, and other munitions, all destined for Britain. Smuggled in under labels like butter and cheese. It was a deadly secret. The ship was essentially a floating contradiction, a luxury liner with a war cargo, a civilian target with a military purpose. And German intelligence knew it. A warning was printed in dozens of American newspapers. Travelers intending to embark on the Atlantic voyage are reminded that a state of war exists, and that vessels flying the flag of Great Britain are liable to destruction. It was signed by the Imperial German Embassy. Most people laughed it off. The voyage began like any other. Smooth weather, elegant meals, champagne, conversations about the war, but nothing too serious. For many, the Lusitania felt untouchable, fast enough to evade danger, too prestigious to be targeted. But as the ship approached Irish waters, the tone shifted. German U-boat activity was high. The British Admiralty knew this, and even sent out warnings. But they didn't provide a destroyer escort. In fact, they withdrew the destroyers meant to protect Lusitania without explanation. Captain William Turner received vague instructions. Avoid the coast. Steer in zigzags to confuse submarines. But that was it. No armed guard. No air reconnaissance. No detailed orders. It was like sending a celebrity through a war zone in a convertible. On May 7, 1915, as the Lusitania approached the coast of Ireland, visibility was clear. The sea was calm. And lurking below the waves was a German U-boat, U-20, commanded by Walter Schwieger. Schwieger spotted the Lusitania around 1 p.m. Through the periscope, he saw an enormous target and a golden opportunity. He gave the order. A single torpedo was fired. The torpedo struck near the ship's starboard bow. The explosion was violent, but what followed stunned everyone. Just seconds after the impact, a second far larger explosion tore through the Lusitania. The entire ship shook. Within 18 minutes, the Lusitania was underwater. Panic took over. Lifeboats failed to launch. Some were destroyed by the angle of the sinking. Passengers jumped into the frigid sea. Children were torn from their parents by suction. Entire families disappeared beneath the waves. 1,198 people died. Among them, 128 Americans. The youngest victim was just 6 months old. The wreck settled on the seafloor, and with it, 1,000 questions. Why did it sink so fast? What caused the second explosion? And why was there no military escort? Britain and the Allies were quick to paint the Lusitania as a civilian tragedy, a barbaric attack on innocents. They used the sinking as a propaganda hammer, and it worked. Headlines screamed, "Babies drowned by German U-boat." Murder on the high seas. Public opinion, especially in the United States, began to shift. The Lusitania became a mart. The German government defended the attack. They had warned passengers. They cited the Lusitania's secret cargo. To them, it was a legitimate military target. President Woodrow Wilson, however, tried to remain neutral. The U.S. didn't enter World War I immediately, but the seed was planted. The Lusitania had changed everything. The British government downplayed the presence of munitions. They denied there was a second explosion from ammunition. They insisted it was just a steam line, or a coal dust blast. But independent divers and later researchers kept finding clues that told another story. In the decades that followed, salvage operations discovered military supplies in the wreck. Crates of ammunition, shells, even rumors of high-explosive fuses. British intelligence had purposefully loaded the Lusitania with contraband, knowing it was a risk. But why? Some say they hoped it would provoke Germany into a blunder. And if the Lusitania was sacrificed to bring America into the war, it worked. 2 years later, the United States declared war on Germany. The Lusitania's shadow had finally pulled them in. Here's where things get darker. Some historians now believe the British Admiralty, under Winston Churchill, used the Lusitania as bait. Internal memos from British intelligence show chilling words. It is most important to attract neutral shipping to our side, even if some sacrifices are necessary. Chilling. Churchill himself once wrote that getting the United States into the war would be worth any price. Did that price include nearly 1,200 lives? There's also the mystery of the second explosion. Experts believe the munitions detonated internally after the torpedo strike. If true, it confirms the Lusitania was loaded with illegal war cargo. But if this was known, why deny it? The answer: to preserve the moral high ground. Civilian martyrdom makes better headlines than military recklessness. Survivors were silenced. Some were warned not to speak to the press. And the wreck was declared off-limits for decades. Even diving near it required special permit. The British government went so far as to destroy related documents during World War II. Why? What was so dangerous about the truth? The Lusitania wasn't just a ship. It was a weapon, used not against the enemy, but against public perception. And the ocean, as it always does, kept its secrets well. Until divers, historians, and truth-seekers refused to let it stay buried. Today, the Lusitania lies off the coast of Kinsale, Ireland, more than 300 feet deep. A broken hull. A silent tomb. Over 100 years later, its legacy still stirs debate. Was it a war crime? A tragic mistake? Or a political gambit? For Germany, it remains a controversial chapter, part of the brutal submarine warfare that defined World War I. For Britain, it was a masterstroke in propaganda, even if soaked in blood. For America, it was the moment of awakening, the prelude to global engagement. And for historians, it's the perfect storm of secrecy, manipulation, and maritime tragedy. The Lusitania's story challenges our belief in truth. It makes us ask who decides which version of history survives. Every shipwreck tells a story, but not every story shakes nations. The Lusitania did, and still does. The question is, was it sunk by a torpedo, or by an agenda? When a ship sinks, we count bodies. When a lie sinks with it, we count generations. The Lusitania was more than a tragedy. It was a lesson about trust, war, and the cost of silence. It reminds us that even in peacetime, the truth is often the first casualty. That governments may sacrifice their own, not in secret chambers, but in plain sight. That the ocean holds more than wrecks. It holds answers, and sometimes, uncomfortable ones. Every year, ceremonies are held in Ireland and Britain to remember the victims. But few speak of the second explosion. Few mention the munitions, the classified documents, the strange orders, the political fallout. Because the truth about the Lusitania is like the ship itself, visible, haunting, and inconvenient. And that's exactly why we have to keep telling its story. Because what happened in 18 minutes on May 7, 1915, still echoes today. If this story made you question what you thought you knew about history, you're not alone. Subscribe to Infinity for more true stories that were almost erased. Comment below, was the Lusitania a casualty, or a calculated move?